Good day, folks. So while India has made a lot of good moves in our geopolitical environment, whether it's closer to home, the weakest spot's supposed to be closest to home across the world, our problem continues to be our over-reliance on Russia and our whatever kind of similar, our belief that Russia will come to our side, though it's kind of getting tattered now. The other is China and our idealistic thought process that, China is and India can basically recreate the century for Asia. But what we've been led astray is, for as far as China is concerned, Asia is China. India is not Asia. In fact, if you remember, in the United States, for the longest time, Asians meant Oriental. So they had to really create another subcategory for South Asians, right? So we were really never considered Asian. So this Asian century, and all these guys, the communists in India and the socialists in India that continue to believe that, have been taken for a massive ride. And as stepping up to the world, Rajiv Bhatia writes, India's proximity to West, its ties with other powers give its foreign policy advantage, not to forget that. In the post-COVID war period, India has moved more time and resources to carefully nurturing a relationship with the major powers, the US, EU, especially France and Germany, the UK, Japan, Russia and China, but hey, I don't care about that. The Indo-Pacific has emerged as a principal theater for Indian diplomacy. The increased emphasis on cooperation with Japan, Australia and the US has turned the Quad into a strong forum. Across the Western shores, prospects have improved with establishment of the I2U2, which is India, Israel, US and UAE. This because possibly due to the progress in India, UAE, India, Israel and UAE, Israel relations. The Indian Ocean region is witnessing an active US-China contestation and China-India competition. Positioning Africa's eastern and southern flanks as a part of the Indo-Pacific would enable India to craft a series of initiatives to strengthen cooperation in maritime activity, economic development, and the blue economy. That's the important part. And as Yamini Iyer and Anshuman Chaudhary write, India's key role in 21st century. As COVID-19, the climate crisis, and Russia's war in Ukraine exacerbate inequities in the world order, there's a strategic relevance for India to be a leader of developing nations in their quest for equity and autonomy. And please do not let China hog this developing nation BS. That's the biggest BS you'll ever hear. Right? For one, this is not a call to non-alignment of the past. Today's international landscape is different, and so are India's strategic priorities. Unlike in the past, it is China, not Russia, that is at the center of the global power tussle. For India, this has strategic implications given our shared borders and China's emergence as a key developmental partner in Asia and Africa. Further, India's strategic and economic preoccupation have shifted since the heydays of NAM. It must move closer to align with Western powers, notably the United States, and instrumental strategic autonomy has replaced the old non-alignment. Thank God for that. US sees India as indispensable partner, says White House. India hits back as China opposes US military deal. Now, can you imagine they're using this LAC and disputed territory? So they have not given up on any part of the border, folks. India must reassess its maritime strategy, as writes Arun Prakash. Given the current Chinese intransigence and a misreading of their expansionist intent, Sino-Indian tensions are likely to persist. Keeping the conflict confined to the Himalayan heights is militarily advantageous to China because a continental fixation helps to keep India confined in a South Asia box. In this context, we must remember that China's jugular vein is to be found in the Indian Ocean sea lanes, which see an overwhelming proportion of its trade, energy, raw materials and finished products carried by merchant shipping. And hence, INS Vikrant ready to make waves on September 2nd, still not a big enough ship. Flight trials on Vikrant from November, Vice Chief. Boeing pitches Atmanirbhar strategy for naval fighter jets as F-18A. This is important that this time we join the United States in this major platform. India, Japan 2+2 meet to focus on security. Eye on China, Navy pushes for third bigger aircraft carrier. I know this is going to take time to put in board, right? To get on board. And we need a bigger air carrier with the nuclear propulsion, where France can help. But more important, during this period, just let's lease this aircraft carrier this time from the United States. And the other thing, don't forget about United States and people who keep writing Biden off. Biden bounces back, but will it be enough? It will be, in my opinion. Whether this script is enough to offset the divisions caused by America's cultural wars or the anger caused by inflation or dispel the impression of a weak president is to be seen. But Joe Biden has shown that when you least expect it, the man who first became senator in 72 can spring a political surprise. And why the United States is necessary, folks? Chips of the new bloc. To get its semiconductor hopes up and running, India must take advantage of the US CHIPS Act and the $52 billion, folks. For production to take place in India, the market orientation needs to be global, which would mean engaging in trade with the rest of the world through global value chains, and US is indispensable, folks. Let's not forget that. The other big event that opens up this big Central Asia for India is what's happening in Iran. It's not been reported here, but I've got this from Conquil Morning Brief. Iran deal inches closer. After months of false starts, an agreement to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal appears closer than ever, as the United States and Iran appear to have resolved many of the sticking points that have delayed a final sign-off. The latest positive signs come from the European Union's drafted what it described as a final text that both Iran and the United States have under consideration since the beginning of August. Very interesting, and that's why when this is written by Michael Kagelman, it's important to India. Why Central Asia matters for South Asia, especially India. This week, Uzbekistan has hosted two major summits with consequences for South Asia. The first was an international conference on Afghanistan held on Monday and Tuesday. And now the foreign ministers from Shanghai SCO, a multilateral group that aims to promote stability across Eurasia, have gathered in Tashkent, the capital, for a meeting on Thursday and Friday focused on regional peace, security and global inflation. This was a couple of weeks ago. Each of these events underscores how Central Asia has emerged as a major factor in South Asia's own geopolitics. The region affects South Asia in several key ways. First, as this week meeting demonstrates, some Central Asian countries, especially Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, have emerged as key diplomatic players. Second, Central Asia has a major geographical impact on South Asia. 3 Central Asian states border Afghanistan. The region serves as a gateway to Russia and to the Middle East, both of which are critical areas for many South Asian states. Finally, Central Asia and especially Uzbekistan and Tajikistan have emerged as quiet influences in Taliban-led Afghanistan, which heavily depends on Central Asian energy. Additionally, the anti-Taliban National Resistance Front is based in Tajikistan. Contrary to predictions, China, Russia and Iran have each taken a cautious approach and limited their footprints in Afghanistan since the United States withdrew troops last year. All this means Central Asia has an opportunity to step up its game. The geopolitics of South Asia shouldn't just be seen through the familiar lenses of India, China and US-China competition. Interesting. India is a big player here. Jay Shankar backs for Eurasian connectivity, Pakistan roots for CPEC. So here's important. The first train from Russia to Chahbar has reached. Decoding India's new multi-alignment plan. The containers had commenced their journey a month ago from St. Petersburg in Russia, entered the Caspian Sea at Astrakhan port and have headed towards India's Nhava port of Mumbai, writes Indrajit Roy. However, India's involvement in diverse, almost antagonistic camps should not be confused with non-alignment, which entails a refusal to side with opposing alliances, camps and groups. By contrast, India's strategy since the turn of the millennium is one of proactive involvement, not only in joining rival alliances, but in creating them. India's departure from non-alignment to multi-alignment exemplifies by its roles in INSTC and Quad. INSTC offers a platform for India to collaborate with Russia, Iran and the Central Asian republics towards fostering a Eurasian free trade area. And that's why, folks, the nuclear deal becomes critical. India's multi-alignment strategy offers its crucial leverage against China, with which it seeks to compete militarily and economically, but recognizes its weakness. INSTC has received far less media attention than initiatives such as Quad, BRI and NDP. However, as a transcontinental corridor that aims to bring Eurasia closer, INSTC is a laudable initiative in its own right. That it helps India consolidate its multi-alignment strategy sweetens the deal. India to pitch for inclusive Eurasian connectivity. India invites Central Asian, Iranian, Afghan and envoys on Chabahar port. China cements influence in Iraq through oil infra deals. India must intervene in Iraq. It's been too slow. India, UAE join hands to launch project in Africa. And this is what even previously Admiral Prakash said. Critical. India's relationship of I2U2 to control East Africa, to control the Indian Ocean becomes extremely critical for the world and the Pacific, the United States to against the expansionism of China, folks. Cheers. So now let's see what people are talking about, these two bullies, Putin and Xi. Defying China, US Senator visits Taipei again. Taiwan proposes 14% jump in defense spending. Hallelujah. A tale of Putin and Xi. This is a very interesting readout by C. Raja Mohan. He writes, India wishes to sit on top of the mountain to watch the tigers fight. This was the assessment of a Chinese scholar reviewing India's approach to the unfolding conflict in Taiwan. That kind of hyper-realist Chinese thinking, however, has not been part of India's strategic culture. In fact, independent India has been far too idealistic. Nothing illustrates it more than enduring illusion of building an Asian century in partnership with Beijing. Delusional, man. Including with PM Saab. India pursued for long a China-first strategy despite persistent evidence that Delhi's contradictions with Beijing are structural and not amenable to easy resolutions. Delhi's reluctance to come to terms with the reality has cost India dearly. The Galwan clash 2 years ago, which followed China tearing apart 3 decades of peace and tranquility on the disputed frontier, appears to have made Delhi wiser. It certainly has cured at least part of India's establishment's chronic sinophilia. There is also an Indian flip side to Liu's argument that China locked in conflict with the US might be more accommodative of India's concerns. This too has been a persistent but unrealistic hope in Delhi. India's problem with China has less to do with the US policies in Asia, but everything to do with their intractable bilateral disputes. Beijing does not believe it must make nice to Delhi that keeps political distance from Washington. This is the important part to know. China is convinced it is now has the power to redeem its historic territorial claims vis-a-vis India and other Asian neighbors. Beijing also believes that the West is in terminal decline and the changing Asian balance of power allows China to set the terms of engagement with the US in its own favor. Russia seems to share this assumption with China, and the two have now proclaimed an alliance without limits. But both of them may have overestimated their own power and underestimated the resilience of the West, and both their economies are in tatters. Doval meets Russia's NSA, discusses security. I don't know where that's going. India was never defensive about stand on Russian oil, says Jaishankar. Right? Jaishankar, another wisp. Russia accuses US of direct Ukraine war role. Grain ships stays on track. Blast rocks Russia base in Crimea. Moscow blames saboteurs. Kiev hints at responsibility. Russia's no-limit China tilt concern for India, says officials. Drone hits Russia's Black Sea Fleet headquarters in Crimea. So the war is getting to Russia, right? He's edicted that we will increase the army. How? Nobody's going to conscript anymore. India, China to send troops to Russia for military exercise. A moronostic move. Russia bank lineup for ace accounts with Indian lenders. They got no choice at all. India in advanced talks, stage of talks with US over MQ-9B drone deal. This just when Jaishankar, China disregarded border agreement with India. Modi, Xi may meet on sidelines of SCO summit next month. Mid-air refueling, these are Sukhois going to exercise in Australia, countering China's Indian Ocean push. Well before Sri Lanka government did a U-turn on its decision to defer a visit to Hambantota port by the Chinese surveillance vessel. The feeling in New Delhi was that Colombo would not be able to stand up to pressure for Beijing on the issue. They could. India and China shouldn't pose threat to each other. Beijing, which they absolutely do. China warns of severe threat to harvest from worst heat wave, bad shape economy. BlackRock, UBS among funds cutting China property exposure. Bad news. Chinese funds given to Solomon Island MPs, corruption right across with Chinese money. So all around us in economic trouble, including India is not doing that well. Bangladesh cut school office hours to save electricity. Ali Soli, Maldives environment minister stabbed while riding bike. Nepal stalls recruitment of Gorkhas in Indian army under Agnipath scheme. And just remember, this is the most dangerous thing that will happen to our relationship. Gorkhas are a binding force, and Gorkhas are absolutely being eyed by the Chinese army because they know that Indian infantry's sword is the Gorkhas. IMF team and Lanka president hold bailout talks, and this is, I believe, that ship was allowed in by China because China threatened to stall this IMF loan. Look at what kind of friends. What are we going to do? Park an alleged air bridge for arms supply to Kiev. This is interesting to note. Pakistan playing ball with America. Shehbaz expresses desire for peaceful relations with India. And Avinash Mohani writes, out of power, Imran a bigger worry for nuclear-armed Pakistan in the world. Whichever way Imran Khan is dealt, Pakistan will have to face political and economic instability and uncertainty in the days to come. Qatar to invest $3 billion in Pakistan economy, obviously being twisted. Pakistan's shifting red lines. The army's growing inability to decisively shape the course of events is most striking. Important. Notwithstanding the deep state's attempts to stifle dissenting voices and the sustained assault on civil society, the army's allegations about the country being a victim of externally sponsored fifth-generation warfare appear increasingly contrived, generating a healthy pushback from civil society, including the political parties. If it was Nawaz Sharif earlier who challenged the all-powerful army narrative, it is the Imran Khan today. And this kind of stuff is happening in Thailand. Multiple bomb arson attack rock Thailand South. This is again extremist Islam. US not to release 3.5 billion in frozen Afghan funds. At least 20 killed, 35 injured as blast rips Kabul mosque. True stability remains elusive in Afghanistan, writes Vivek Karju. The US action against Aryaman al-Zawahiri will exacerbate these intra-Taliban tensions, and the Zardans would be especially wary of the US. And Afghanistan, 1 year on, as written by Michael Kugelman, what does he say? He says growing governance pressures on the Taliban could exacerbate the regime's internal divisions and hamper efforts to ease them, and all of this could pave the way for the emergence of new armed resistance. It could get tougher for the Taliban next year after the revelation that Zawahiri was living in Kabul. International recognition has never been further away, and this is the important part, folks. Area in trouble, we got to concentrate, spread ourselves thick and fast. Cheers and Jai Hind.